At the will reading, the sound that struck hardest wasn't the lawyer's voice. It was my parents laughing as they handed my sister a check worth more than most houses. Then a single dollar slid toward me, crisp and mocking. My father didn't blink when he said, "Go earn your own." My mother smirked, almost pleased with herself. Some kids just don't measure up. No one disagreed, not even my sister. I stayed silent, my hand still on the table, while under the polished marble surface, my thumb hovered over the execute button on my tablet. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I looked down at the dollar bill. It was green, wrinkled, and utterly insignificant against the vast expanse of the marble table. My father, Kenneth, leaned back in his leather chair, a self-satisfied grin plastered across his face. My mother, Angela, was already fussing over Alexis, my younger sister, cooing about how $13.8 million was just the beginning for her star. Alexis, who couldn't calculate the load-bearing capacity of a toothpick, beamed, already mentally spending the fortune. My pulse didn't spike. My hands didn't shake. Structural integrity requires knowing exactly how much weight a beam can hold before it snaps, and I had calculated this breaking point years ago. I simply picked up the dollar bill with 2 fingers, as if handling a contaminated specimen, and slipped it into my coat pocket. It wasn't money. It was a receipt. A receipt for 27 years of being the invisible engine that kept their luxury lifestyle running. They called me a failure, but the architectural world will know me as Olivia, the true designer of this empire. Well? Kenneth prompted, clearly disappointed by my lack of hysterics. Aren't you going to say thank you? Most people would kill for $1 from Arthur's estate. Thank you, I said. My voice was calm, almost bored. It echoed slightly in the vast, cold library of the glass monolith, the estate I had designed when I was 22, though the Architectural Digest spread credited my father. Rising from the chair felt like shedding a layer of concrete. I gathered my tablet, my coat, and my dignity. Where do you think you're going? Angela snapped, her smirk faltering for a fraction of a second. We haven't discussed the transition. You still have projects to finish. I'm resigning, I said, buttoning my coat. Effective immediately. You can't resign. Kenneth laughed, a harsh, barking sound. You're the only one who knows how the server works. You're the only one who knows the passwords. That sounds like a management problem, I replied, turning my back on them. I walked out of the library, my heels clicking on the floor I had specified, past the award-winning architectural models I had built with my own hands, past the portraits of my ancestors who would have been ashamed of the people sitting in that room. I stepped out into the aspen blizzard. The cold air hit me like a slap, sharp and cleansing. It was a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the library, the stifling weight of their expectations and their cruelty. As I reached my car, I pulled out my tablet. The code I had written weeks ago, a fail-safe I had hoped never to use, was pulsing on the screen. I tapped execute. Inside the glass monolith, the hum of the smart house system deepened, then stuttered. The lights in the great hall flickered once, twice, and then died. The ambient heating, kept at a tropical 75 degrees to protect Angela's orchids, cut out instantly. The electronic tinting on the massive glass walls, designed to offer privacy and insulation, shifted. The glass turned opaque, a dull, lifeless gray. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly what was happening. The estate was sealing itself. The electronic locks on the gates disengaged to let me out, then slammed shut with a final, metallic clank. I drove away into the whiteout, leaving my family in the dark, in the cold, in the prison they had built for themselves, funded by the genius they had valued at exactly $1. The drive to the cabin took 40 minutes. It was a small, A-frame structure tucked away in the woods, rented under a pseudonym. It smelled of pine and wood smoke, a world away from the sterile, glass cage I had just left. I built a fire, the flames licking at the dry logs, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Then I opened my laptop. It was time to look at the ledger. Not the financial one, but the emotional one. The balance sheet of my life. For 7 years, I had been the ghost architect. The phantom limb of the firm. It started when I was 19. Kenneth and Angela had lost their creative spark decades ago, their designs becoming stale and derivative. But they had a brand to maintain, a lifestyle to fund. So they turned to me. "You're too fragile for the industry, Olivia," my mother had said, stroking my hair with a hand that felt more like a claw. "The critics would eat you alive. Let us protect you. Let us handle the business side. You just draw." And I believed them. I believed I was broken. I believed I needed their protection. So I drew. I designed skyscrapers that defied gravity, museums that played with light, homes that breathed. And every time, Kenneth signed his name on the blueprints. Every time, Alexis stood in front of the cameras, smiling her vacant smile, accepting awards for buildings she couldn't even navigate, let alone design. They told the world I was a troubled, a recluse, a burden they carried out of familial duty. They gaslit me into a basement office, feeding me scraps of praise while they feasted on the banquet of my talent. The $13.8 million wasn't an inheritance. It was back pay. It was the cumulative value of the licensing fees they had stolen from me, project by project, year by year. I thought about the black sheep label they had pinned on me. It wasn't because I was a failure. It wasn't because I was rebellious. It was because I saw them. I saw the cracks in their facade, the emptiness behind their eyes. In a narcissistic system, the truth teller is the most dangerous person in the room. I wasn't the black sheep because I was bad. I was the black sheep because I refused to be colorblind to their lies. I wasn't fragile. I was formidable. And they were about to find out just how strong the foundation of a ghost could be. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from Kenneth. "Olivia. What the hell did you do? The power is out. The heat is off. It's freezing in here. Turn it back on right now or I will sue you for everything you have. I will ruin you. Do you hear me? I will tell everyone about your episodes. I will have you committed. Turn it on." I listened to his voice, shrill with panic and rage. There was no concern for me. No, "Are you okay, driving in this storm?" Just threats. Just demands. Just the flailing of a man who realizes he has lost control of his most valuable asset. I deleted the voicemail. Then I opened the folder marked Evidence. Inside were the files from the biometric USB drive I had taken from the estate before the will reading. Metadata. Keystroke logs. Retinal scan verifications. Proof. Undeniable, concrete proof that every line, every curve, every calculation in the firm's portfolio for the last 7 years belonged to me. I wasn't just going to leave them in the dark. I was going to turn on the lights. And when I did, the whole world would see them for exactly what they were. Thieves. Liars. Frauds. Back at the glass monolith, the temperature was dropping. The blizzard outside was howling, throwing snow against the opaque glass walls. My family was trapped in a gray box, their expensive furs providing little warmth against the creeping chill. Alexis was the first to break. She posted a video on Instagram, tears streaming down her perfectly contoured face, the light from her phone illuminating her panic. "Guys, please help. My psycho sister hacked our house. She's holding us hostage. It's so cold. We're going to freeze. She's mentally ill, you guys, she's off her meds. Please, someone call the police." She was more worried about her phone battery dying and losing her audience than she was about the hypothermia setting in. It was a performance, just like everything else in her life. Angela sent a text. "We know you stole the hard drives. Bring them back, or we release your medical records to the board. We will destroy your reputation. You will never work in this town again." They still didn't get it. They thought they still held the cards. They thought they could bully me back into submission. But the currency had changed. They were trading in fear. I was trading in facts. I watched the snow pile up outside the cabin window. It was peaceful here. Quiet. A stark contrast to the chaos I knew was unfolding in the estate. I felt a strange sense of calm settling over me. It wasn't happiness, exactly. It was the absence of noise. The absence of their voices in my head, telling me I wasn't enough. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat back down at the computer. I had a meeting in the morning. Not with my family. Not with a therapist. With a lawyer. A shark of an IP attorney named Marcus Thorne, who had a reputation for eating fraudulent firms for breakfast. I forwarded him the files. Then I drafted a single email to my father. Subject, termination of services. To Kenneth@granddesigns.com. The system lockout is a safety feature triggered by unauthorized access. Since none of you are the registered administrators of the intellectual property contained within the server, the house has recognized you as intruders. It will remain in lockdown until the rightful owner resets it. I suggest you put on a sweater. I hit send. The war had begun. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting for their approval. I was fighting for my name. The next morning, I didn't go to the family lawyer. I went to Marcus Thorne. His office wasn't in a glass tower, it was in a refurbished industrial warehouse, all exposed brick and steel beams. It felt solid. Real. Just like the man himself. Thorne was a legend in the architectural world, not for designing buildings, but for dismantling the people who stole them. He looked at the biometric USB drive I placed on his desk like a predator eyeing a wounded gazelle. This contains everything, he asked, his voice gravelly. Every keystroke, I confirmed. Every metadata tag. Every retinal scan login from the server room. It proves I didn't just design the Meridian Tower or the Helix Bridge. It proves I created the entire source code for the firm's aesthetic for the last 7 years. Thorne plugged the drive in. He scrolled through the files, his eyes darting back and forth. A slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. They didn't just steal your work, Olivia. They copyrighted it under a fraudulent entity. This isn't just intellectual property theft. This is racketeering. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. What do you want? Settlement? Public apology? Name on the door? I want it all, I said. I want the assets frozen. I want a lien on every active project. And I want them to know it's over. Today. We spent the next 2 hours drafting the paperwork. It wasn't a legal filing, it was an eviction notice for their lives. A cease and desist order that covered everything from the firm's bank accounts to the use of my designs in their marketing materials. By the time we were done, the Grand Designs empire was effectively paralyzed. I've arranged a meeting, I told Thorne as I stood up. At the estate. 1 hour. They're locked out, he reminded me. The system won't let them in. I'm unlocking one room, I said. The library. It's the only room with a fireplace. I want them warm enough to listen, but cold enough to remember who controls the thermostat. I sent the digital key to Kenneth's phone. It was a single-use code. It would grant them access to the library and nothing else. No bathrooms. No kitchen. No bedrooms. Just the room where they had handed me a single dollar bill 24 hours ago. When we arrived at the glass monolith, the snow had stopped, but the temperature was still in the single digits. My family was waiting by the gate, huddled in their cars, engines running to keep warm. When they saw me, Kenneth jumped out, his face purple with rage. You ungrateful little. Save it, I cut him off, rolling down my window just an inch. Mr. Thorne is here to discuss the terms of your surrender. The library is open. Don't touch anything. We walked into the house. It was silent as a tomb. The air was frigid, the breath of my parents misting in front of them as they hurried toward the library doors. I followed at a leisurely pace, Thorne beside me. I checked my tablet. The sensors showed the library temperature was rising to a bearable 60 degrees. comfortable but not cozy. They huddled around the fireplace, wrapped in their minks and cashmere, looking like refugees from a high-fashion disaster movie. Kenneth was pacing. Angela was shivering, her lips a pale shade of blue. Alexis was sitting on a chair, scrolling through her phone, likely deleting the comments on her hostage video which had turned from sympathy to ridicule once people realized she was tweeting from a mansion. "This is illegal," Kenneth shouted as we entered. "You can't lock us out of our own home. You can't freeze our accounts." "Actually," Thorne said, placing his briefcase on the table, "she can." And she did. "But that's the least of your problems." He didn't pull out papers. He pulled out a remote. He pointed it at the large screen built into the library wall, the one usually reserved for showing clients renderings of buildings I had designed. "We found a video file on the server," Thorne said. "Hidden in a partition that only the system administrator, Olivia, could access. It seems Grandpa Arthur was a lot more tech-savvy than you gave him credit for." Kenneth froze. Arthur was senile. He didn't know what day it was. "Let's see," I said. The screen flickered to life. It was Grandpa Arthur. He was sitting in this very room, 3 months before he died. He didn't look senile. He looked sharp. He looked angry. "If you are watching this," Arthur's voice boomed, filling the cold room, "it means my son and his wife have done exactly what I expected them to do. They have tried to cash the check." Angela gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "They told everyone I was losing my mind," Arthur continued, staring directly into the camera lens. "They brought in doctors on their payroll to certify me incompetent so they could take control of the firm. They didn't think I knew. But I knew. I knew who was drawing the lines. I knew who was holding the pen." He leaned forward. "They think Olivia is the broken one. But she is the only one who isn't bending. So, I set a trap." On screen, Arthur held up a check. It was identical to the one Kenneth had practically drooled over yesterday. "This check for $13.8 million is drawn from a shell account I set up specifically for this purpose. It is a poison pill. The moment it is deposited, it triggers an automatic audit of the firm's financials by the IRS and the SEC. It also triggers a clause in my living trust." Kenneth made a noise like a dying animal. "The clause states that any attempt by Kenneth or Angela to access these funds constitutes undeniable proof of embezzlement and fraud. Upon this attempt, the entirety of the estate, the firm, and all intellectual property rights immediately transfer to the true architect of this family's legacy." Arthur smiled, a cold, hard smile that mirrored the one I felt on my own face. "To my granddaughter, Olivia. The inheritance wasn't the money, Kenneth. The inheritance was the evidence." The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavier than the snow outside. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. He couldn't," Kenneth whispered. "He signed the papers. We have the papers." "You have papers signed by a man who was recording you the entire time," Thorne said. "We have the timestamps. We have the audio of you discussing how to forge his signature on the transfer deeds. It's all on the drive." Kenneth looked at me. His eyes were wild, desperate. For a second, I thought he was going to beg. Instead, he lunged. He scrambled across the marble table, his hands reaching for my throat. "You bitch. You set this up." The room flashed red. A siren blared, short and sharp. The automated security system, recognizing a physical threat to the administrator, engaged. A laser grid projected across the table, and the heavy magnetic locks on the library doors slammed home with a deafening thud. "Sit down," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a laser. Kenneth froze, panting, realizing he was trapped. He sank back into his chair, defeated. But it was Angela who broke. She didn't attack. She screamed. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of existential terror. It was the sound of a narcissist whose reflection had just been shattered. For 50 years, Angela had built her entire identity on being the matriarch of a dynasty, the wife of a genius, the mother of a star. She had cultivated an image of perfection so thick it was armor. And in 1 second, it was stripped away. She wasn't a queen. She was a thief. She wasn't talented. She was a parasite. No, she shrieked, clawing at her expensive coat. No. We did this for the family. We did this for you. You couldn't handle the pressure. We were protecting you. She fell to her knees, crawling toward me, her face a mask of ruined mascara and desperation. Olivia, please. You can't do this. We're your parents. We gave you everything. You owe us. I looked down at her. I watched her weep, not for the relationship we had lost, but for the status she was losing. Even now, in the wreckage, she was trying to manipulate me. She was trying to turn her victimhood into a weapon. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the single, wrinkled dollar bill. I placed it gently on the marble table between us. You valued me at $1, I said. The words hung in the cold air. I'm valuing you at 0. I nodded to Thorne. He tapped his phone. The magnetic locks on the library doors disengaged with a hiss. You have 10 minutes to vacate the premises, I said. The police are en route to collect your statements regarding the embezzlement charges. I suggest you call a lawyer. A cheap one. Turning my back on them didn't feel like leaving. It felt like the final demolition of a condemned structure. I didn't wait for them to leave. I didn't watch the police cars pull up the driveway. I got into my car and drove away from the glass monolith for the last time. 6 months later, the glass estate was sold. I didn't want to live in the cage, even if I owned the keys. I used the proceeds to buy a small, mid-century building in the city. It had brick walls, large windows that actually opened, and heating that didn't require a degree in computer science to operate. I named the firm Origin Architecture. The sign on the door was simple. Bronze letters on wood. Inside, the office was warm. It was filled with light, with plants, with the hum of creativity. I hired 5 other architects, all of them ghosts I had met over the years, brilliant creatives who had been exploited and hidden away by big firms. We didn't just build buildings. We built careers. We built credit. Every blueprint that left our office had the name of the person who drew it stamped right next to mine. I sat at my drafting table, the afternoon sun warming my back. The silence in the room wasn't the heavy, oppressive silence of the estate. It was a peaceful silence. The silence of focus. The silence of freedom. I picked up my pencil and started to sketch. A new project. A community center with a roof that opened to the sky. Revenge is often painted as a fire, a destructive force that burns everything down. But as I drew the first line on the fresh white paper, I realized that true revenge isn't about destruction. It's about construction. It's about taking the bricks they threw at you and using them to build a door. A door they can never walk through. I had built my door. And I had walked through it, into a life that was finally, undeniably, mine. If you've ever had to build your own door when they locked you out, share this story. You are the architect of your own life now.